I've been using Lightroom as my primary editing, culling, sorting photo software for 10 years now. And I'm gonna walk you through whether you're a beginner or you're just using kind of Lightroom for the first time and you're not exactly sure, like, am I using this correctly? Am I getting the most out of this as I can? I'm gonna walk you through everything you need to know about using Lightroom for your photos. So the most important thing before you even start getting into the actual program is understanding how Lightroom works. And there's two really important things you need to know before you even open the program. The first thing is understanding how Lightroom uses photos. So if you've ever used something like Photoshop, it uses photos in a completely different way than Lightroom does. And it has to do with the idea of having source files instead of using or editing the actual file. This is also called like non-destructive photo editing because even though that sounds really scary, it means that Lightroom doesn't actually use your original file to edit. It kind of takes a copy of your image, takes a copy of the original into the program. As you're making changes to the dials in the editing portion of Lightroom, you're not actually affecting the original file. So you can do whatever you want and do as many crazy things as possible, and it won't affect your original. Photoshop is completely different in the way that if you bring a photo into Photoshop, you make changes and you click save, that saves right over your original image unless you copy it yourself and you make a backup. The second really important thing to understand before you start using Lightroom is the idea of catalogs. For Lightroom, every time you click to open Lightroom, you need to open a specific catalog. So there's no kind of like generic working program. You need to open a specific catalog. So a Lightroom catalog is kind of like, well, a catalog of all of the images that you may have on your computer or on a hard drive so that you can easily access them and edit them and share them and do whatever you want with them. Lightroom only kind of points you to where your images are permanently stored. So unlike a program like iPhoto, where the photo is actually kind of stored within the program files, for Lightroom, it doesn't actually store any images at all. But instead of books in this library, it just records the location and the current editing settings that you've put on your photos, and it records the location of where your photos at least were at the last time that the program was opened. I've used catalogs in two main ways over the years. I've used a different catalog for each shoot that I've used. I don't do that anymore. The way that I use it now is that I just have one big massive catalog that has all of my photos in it. Well, that's actually not true. I really have two big massive catalogs. One big massive catalog is everything between now and 2018, and everything before 2018 is called my archive catalog, and that's all photos that, I'm not needing to use anytime soon. It really is just like an archive of my personal work as well as my business photos. When you bring in photos, when you import photos into Lightroom, it's not actually bringing the photos into the program. It's just bringing in the location and a kind of copy of your images so that you can work on them, edit them, sort through them in this program. Okay, so now we can get into using the actual program, and what I'm gonna do is kind of walk you through all of the kind of important aspects that you need to know about actually using Lightroom. And then at the end, I'm going to show you how I normally would bring in a job, show you roughly kind of like how I edited it, how I use the program, and then how I export images. I've already opened up Lightroom and I've opened it up to a wedding. Before we even, touch anything in here, it's important to show you kind of how I open this because this is a catalog. So there's no kind of generic kind of start screen to Lightroom. You're just always opening a certain catalog, whether you need to start a new catalog or opening an existing catalog. So how it works for me is I store all my photos as well as all my Lightroom catalogs on hard drives. So I have one of these hard drives, it's connected to the computer right now, and it's called Lightroom Catalogs. And all it contains is my catalog and all of the information that, Lightroom needs in order for it to run. And then I store all my photos on, one of these hard drives. We'll get into that a little bit more later. So here I've opened this hard drive that's called Lightroom Catalogs, and this is what I was talking about. We have one called Production Catalog, and then we have called Cleveland Studios Archive. So those are the kind of the two catalogs that I have. And so how it works is it creates, you have to create a folder like this, and then this is the actual catalog folder. So there's lots of different information going on here, but the important thing is that you're gonna go in here and you're gonna double click on this in order to open the catalog that you want to work in. So like I said before, years ago, I actually had a different catalog for each wedding that I shot. I thought this was a really good idea at the time, and there are some pros and cons to using it, but I would say in general, you're not getting the most that you can out of Lightroom if you're just using individual catalogs for each different job or shoot or something like that. So I really like having one big, massive catalog, and I've found that I haven't really had issues with, the program running too slowly or anything like that. I currently have 172,897 images in this catalog, and it works pretty well. I don't really have issues with major slowness or anything. Let's start by looking at this top right corner. These are kind of like the kind of workspaces or tabs that you have. I think they're called modules technically or something like that. But these are kind of the different kind of major aspects to the program. And I would say the ones that you really only need to worry about, the ones that I really only use are library, develop, and print. So library is kind of used for sorting and looking through images. Develop is where you actually edit images. The only other one I use is this print tab, and that's how I print, my fine art prints here in our studio. Okay, so let's go back to library, and I'm just gonna walk you through the screen and show you everything you need to know. This module is really for looking through your images, sorting through them, choosing which ones are like the ones you wanna use, the ones you wanna edit, and the ones that you want to get rid of. So I would say a couple important things here is like the navigator. So this is where you can, if you just click on an image, it automatically zooms into the photo. But you can actually change what that, click will do. So right now it's set at fit, so it's just gonna fit to this thing. You can click, fill, you can click 100%, 25%, 6%, and that's actually really important because I will use different percentages as I'm looking through the photos. I find that sometimes I actually don't want the image to be too big because it's kind of hard to kind of get the whole image and see how it feels if it's too big. So a lot of the time I'll actually use 33% as I'm looking through photos because I find that's a little easier than it filling the entire screen. The next thing down is your actual kind of library of photos, the catalog of photos. And there's a bunch of things here. This top section where it says catalog is where you can click on this and it will just have the long list of all of the images that are in your catalog. And then below that is folders. So this goes back to the idea of that, Lightroom doesn't hold the photos, it just points to where your photos are stored. And you choose that when you first import your images, or if you can just copy your images to your computer any way you'd like, and then just tell Lightroom, hey, there's some photos on my computer that I want you to include. And I'll show you how to do that at the end. This is a really great thing about Lightroom is the fact that you can go through and have your photos organized and sorted a certain way so you can easily access images. And as a wedding photographer, that's really important because we're often looking at past weddings that we've shot in order to post on Instagram, to update our website, things like that. So you can see things that are grayed out and then things that are in white text here. When it's not grayed out and it has this white text, Lightroom knows where the photos are and they're, there. So it means that the hard drive is plugged in and it can access the photos. And so this is how we store all of our work. How I like to do it is I like to do it in categories of years, and then whether it's personal or business, and then under that I have everything by date and then the name of the job. Every 2 years is stored on one of these 4 terabyte hard drives. It's currently just enough to hold everything, but I think pretty soon I may have to be switching to each year having its own kind of 4 terabyte hard drive. As you can see on this left side, some of these years are grayed out, which means just the hard drive is not plugged into my computer, so Lightroom can't see it and it can't like do anything. And so that's really important about knowing where your photos are and remembering that your photos aren't stored in Lightroom. So below the folders, let's just like hide all these things because it's a bit overwhelming. So below folders, we have a thing called collections. And these are just kind of folders within Lightroom that you can kind of like organize or make some temporary projects. And so it's just a way to be able to move some photos into this folder, but you're not actually moving the original folder. So for example, how we use it sometimes is if we're doing some previews for a wedding. What we'll do is we'll make one of these collections, we'll call it, so-and-so's preview photos. And so we have the whole wedding over here, and then what we'll do is just drag a couple of those photos into that collection. And that's just an easy and quick way to kind of, make a folder of images that you need to use for a specific, project or use. Below collections, we have published services. For example, we use PicTime for all of our wedding clients. And so what you can do with PicTime, and it looks like Flickr is here, I don't use that, or Adobe Stock, you're actually able to, instead of exporting photos, kind of to your hard drive or whatever, you can upload photos directly to online services, which is really great. Import, export, we'll get to that after we do the full walkthrough. Okay, so now we get to the bottom portion where this kind of strip, this timeline of photos. And this is kind of how just like the library is set up. There is the timeline of photos along the bottom, and this is a really easy way to kind of scroll through the entire project. And then when you click on something, it shows up on this main view here. So up here, you can have 2 different ways to view photos in this top section. You can have like kind of this single version, having one photo, and then you can have, different zooms, or you can have the grid where you're actually having all the photos in different grids. Now, something that's really helpful is you can change the size of the thumbnails. So you can make it really big, or you can make it really, really tiny to be able to see, everything at one time. Another thing for you to know on this, bar along here is how to sort your images. I use this a lot. Right now they're being sorted by file name, but you can sort them by the actual capture time. A lot of different things that can be really helpful as you're sorting through your photos. One of the most important tools in this section is how you sort and flag images you want to use and you don't want to use. So Lightroom has a few different ways to do this. And you can actually see them by going to this loop view, this view, and then going to this bottom right corner. And so you can see that there's stars here, there's little flags, there's 3 little flags here, there's some stars, and there's a whole bunch of colors. And so those are the kind of 3 main ways where you can kind of put marks on photos so that you know what you like and what you don't like. And you can do that a few different ways. You can right-click on the photo and you can set the ratings. So you can either set flags, set a rating, star from 1 to 5. You can set the color label for the image. So these are set as purple. So if I set this rating to green, for example, it'll change this to green. A few different ways that you can also do this is with keyboard shortcuts. So if I hit 1, for example, it disappears. And that's because I have my filter over here as showing actually all the 5 stars. Okay, so I turned off all my filters and now this is green and it's 1 star. If I hit 2 on my keyboard, it sets it to 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, you get the point. Another thing is just using the 2 bracket keys on your keyboard, and that also just lowers the rating from a 5, 4, 3, 2. It just decreases it or increases it from wherever it's already set at. There's also additional shortcuts. So for example, if I hit 8 on my keyboard, it actually removes the green label or it adds it. And you might tell me, well, Luke, I don't like green. I want to use different colors and different shortcuts. That's fine too. So you can go to Photo, and then set color label. And this is where you can see the shortcut numbers for them. So you can use 6, 7, 8, 9, and that is, the shortcuts for flagging a photo that color. The other one is flagging photos, and that's, in order to flag it, you hit P. So let me do that here. So I hit P, and this is what happens. It flags as a pic. If I want to undo that or remove the flag, you hit U. And then if I want to, reject a photo, you hit X, which is perfect for rejecting. And you can also use Command up and Command down, and that kind of increases or decreases the flag depending on where you are. So if I hit down, it makes it neutral. If I hit down again, it'll decrease the status. Something handy about rejecting photos in this way is that you can go to Photo and then you can click Delete Rejected Photos. So if you forget any of these keyboard shortcuts, it's really easy. You just go to Photo and then you go to, set which one you want to set, and then you can see what the shortcut is. How we mostly do it is through the star system, as well as using a few colors for specific things. Especially, we actually notate all of our film photos by creating them into the color purple. So you can see these photos are shot on film because they're purple. Another really helpful tool in this library section is the search. I actually use this a lot for this YouTube channel. So, for example, say you're like, okay, I want to find out what photos are shot at, I don't know, F4. I want to see what photos are shot on F4. So you can go up to the library filter up here and you can click on custom filter, and there's all of these different ways that you can sort through and search through your photos. So I'm going to click, you can do text, you can do attributes, but I'm gonna click on metadata here, and I wanna look at everything that was, okay, here we go. I wanna see everything that's shot on like the 35mm lens. And then I wanna see, what's 5-star. And so here it shows you all the photos within that categories, and I can go through and I can make a YouTube video about, hey, these are the photos that I shot on the 35mm Z series lens. And I can export all of these photos and I can show them to you, and I can be like, look how awesome this lens is. So that's a pretty cool tool and feature to be able to search through your gallery of photos with certain criteria. The last thing that I'm gonna show you that's important in the library module is this thing on the far left, and that's called the Quick Develop. So this is a way that you can kind of edit your photos with very kind of big dials, if that makes sense. This is not fine-tuned precision editing. This is editing in very kind of like big increments. So for example, I can change, the temperature of the photo. I can move it like quite extreme, or I can go the other way. You can add one of the presets that you have, they include one, or for example, we have our presets that we use on our photos. And then what you can do is just kind of make, kind of a few changes on here. And you can even do exposure. I don't really use clarity and vibrance here, at least. What's really cool about this quick develop thing is that you can go to this grid view, and then if there's this whole section that you're like, oh, you know what? This whole section is completely like not exposed properly, is that you can change lots of photos all at one time. So I just clicked, expose, and then it changed all of the photos at the same time. So what I'll do is, maybe there's a part of the day where I, went inside and I forgot to change my white balance. I'll go through and edit a whole section at a time and just move the white balance up a little bit so that when I'm actually going through and editing, the photo is closer to what it's going to be in the final and not just like completely yellow or completely blue. I find, getting the photo at least roughly to the right area, I just find it makes it easier for me to sort through photos. It's a little bit more enjoyable, but also helps me see the photos a little just bit more accurately and helps me make better choices. There is a few other tabs under this right side, but honestly, I don't really use these very much. Things like keywording and metadata, I don't really use that much. So we're gonna skip that. All right, let's go to the develop mode. So you have sorted through all of your images, you've starred all the ones that you want, you've colored all the ones that you want, and now it's time to edit your actual images. So here's the develop mode. let's go around the same thing like we did last time. Let's start up at this top left corner. Same thing, this is the navigation. You're able to kind of zoom in. One thing that's kind of handy is that say you're zoomed in at this 100%, you're able to actually move where the zoomed is by just clicking on this. And this is really helpful if you're kind of doing, you're up close doing some retouching and you don't want to have to zoom in and out every time. You can just like move this little section up to a little different spot. This is really helpful if you're if you're really zoomed in at like 800%, and then you're able just to move this up like this. You can also go like this, but it's helpful to be able to kind of, put your view in a specific spot. So the next thing is the presets. So this is where you store all of the, preset magic of all of our editing. So we have a few presets here that we use on our own photos. And so whether you make your own presets or you purchase presets, this is where you actually apply those presets to your photos, and it makes your life so much easier. There's also a whole bunch of presets, that Lightroom gives you. I don't think they're very good, but they're there. Something else that's pretty cool is these snapshots. So this enables you to kind of like take a quick snapshot of where you are in the current editing process. So say you're like, okay, I think I kind of wanted, I think I like where I've edited this photo, but I want to keep working on it, but I don't want to lose where I am. And so what you do is pretty much, if you just like take a snapshot and it just says like create at this time and this time. So say I go through and make some new edits. I'm like really gonna like change this thing. I'm gonna make it like blue and dark and whatever. And then you're like, oh, you know what? I really like where I was this morning at 11:43. So you can go back and click on this and it takes you back to where you were before. History, I kind of find this a similar thing. So it's interesting that they created an additional tool for that. But history just helps you like go back in history. And so it records everything that you've done. And so if you were like, oh, you know what, I want to go back a few steps, it's kind of like doing undo. So you can just like scroll all the way back and put it back to, an earlier time. The last thing is collections, and these are the same collections that I was talking about in the library module. You can just click on one of these collections and it would take you to, to that kind of sub, folder of images that you're, putting together for a project or something. There aren't really any different tools along the bottom here. It's just, you can have multiple screens if you want. But this really is the same layout. It's just a way to navigate through your photos. Even though you can star things and make them, different colors in this category, I find that because it's opening to editing, this module works best just for editing. I find if you're actually sorting through images, it's not as fast here as it is in the library module. So I kind of stick to sorting through, selecting, choosing photos just in that library module. And then if I move into develop, I'm not, doing that because I find it's actually a lot slower in this section than it is in the library section. So why you would use these things here is if you were like, oh, you know what? I wanted to edit all the 4-star photos, or I want to edit all the 5-star photos, or I want to look at my film photos and, make some edits to it, or, crop them or do something like that. Now let's get into the actual editing side. So the thing that you really only need to worry about is the basic panel. Even though it says basic, this is where you can do a ton of incredible editing. And don't feel like you need to be overwhelmed or stressed about all of these other sections, or feel like, oh, in order to be really editing, I need to use like every single section. You don't really. You can do everything you need in the basic section. But honestly, each one of these sections could be its own video. And so I'm not gonna go into any of those sections, but definitely, feel free to go through and try things and see how it works. But you can do more than all you need to do in just the basic section. This is all of your standard editing, things, exposure, contrast, highlights, things like that. I would honestly say the best way to kind of get your hands dirty in editing photos is to try things. So just go through and move some of these dials around and see what happens, what it does when you change them. And then just like see whether you like it or not. Something that's also important in editing photos is to give yourself some time in between editing. So edit a photo, step away from it for a few hours or a day or so and come back. And then you might be like, oh, you know what? I don't like how blue this photo is, so I'm gonna change it. That's like horrible. I hate all of this. The other important section that you should definitely know about are these little icons along the top. And so this first section is the editing. Second is the crop. This is really important if you want to crop things. This is kind of the healing tool. This is a really cool part about Lightroom, and that is like you can heal things and fix things in your photos. So there's under healing, there's 3 more kind of settings. So one is kind of, I think this is kind of like, okay, this is content aware. So kind of AI version of kind of it figures out what you need to fix. The healing brush, and then the straight up clone tool. So I'll just show you what the clone tool is. So if you just click on something, it will clone whatever is over here. So I'm like gonna clone some of this tree over here. And so if you click and drag this whole thing, it will clone wherever you put that over to. And so that's really helpful. I know this is like crazy, but if we zoom in here, I can see that there's maybe a little bit of garbage down here, or there's a couple like rose petals or something. And so what I would do is take this and zoom in here and move the size of it. I'm just moving the size of it with my mouse, and then clicking. I'm gonna click on the heal brush. Actually, no. Let's do the clone. And so I'm gonna click over it like that, and then move this right here, and that clones a part of the, it clones part of this stone over, and so now there's no garbage slash flower petal there bothering me anymore. Red eye. I never really use this. And then the last thing is this mask. This is definitely maybe something I'll do a whole video on, but this is really cool. This is pretty much enables you to paint on or put a gradient with photo editing, settings. So you can paint just with exposure, or you could paint just with contrast. So a great example for that is if I click on brush, and then it shows me, oh, look, I can have exposure way up here. So maybe I want to brighten up this section over here. I can take my brush and just paint in some exposure, which is amazing. So that is definitely a really fun thing to play around with. And then the last, I would say the most powerful tool that the develop section has is the ability to copy your editing. Now, this is what like sets it completely apart from Photoshop, is that you can make all these edits. So say, I'm gonna make this like weird mask thing that I brighten this section up. I'm going to, make this warmer, make it brighter. Whoa, it's looking very horrible right now. But say this looks so beautiful to you and you wanna copy that and you wanna copy it to all of your photos. What you can do is click Command C, copy, or you can go over here in the bottom left and click copy, and you can copy all of the different settings from one photo and paste it to another photo. So I'm just gonna do check all, click copy, and I can go over to this next photo and hit paste, and it takes all of my settings and pastes it to the next photo. And so that's the amazing thing about Lightroom. That's what makes it one of the top programs for photo editing, is powerful tools like that. The last module that I use in Lightroom is this print section. I don't really use any of the other ones, but I find this a really great tool for printing. I'm just gonna kind of give you a quick overview here, and that's pretty much is that you can have kind of templates of how things are laid out. For example, when we get a print order in from a client, and say they want a 4x6, they want a 8x10, and they want a 3x7. I don't know who would buy that. Okay, let's delete that. That's weird. Maybe another 8x10. And so what you can do, so what this is showing right now, this is a max size. So this is a 17-inch by 22-inch sheet of paper that we have to print. And then you can kind of move things around on the paper. You can rotate them. I can rotate this one to have a better use of paper. And then what I can do is click and just drag the image that I want to print right in here. I can do a bunch of different settings that I want, and then I can click print. This is another good reason why I would use the collections on the far left side, is that if we have a print order come in, I can go into their wedding, click and drag it all into the print me category or the print me collection. And then I can come into print, and then I can just click on that collection, and then it will show up all the photos that I need to print. And then I can, drag those onto the paper and then get those printed. Okay, so now we're here at the end and I'm gonna show you how I actually kind of use Lightroom. So I'm gonna kind of walk you through from beginning to end how I use it. How you import photos is either if you just like put an SD card or something into your camera, often Lightroom will just automatically open this. But how you do it is you just go into import here, and then usually, my SD card will come up on this left-hand side. And so you would just like click on it. In this case, I don't have an SD card with photos right now to load for you, but you can load them from anywhere. And so this is actually a good kind of example of how Lightroom works, is that you can have photos anywhere and you're just gonna bring them into a Lightroom so that Lightroom is aware that they exist somewhere. And so for example, we can do, it's on my hard drive here on my iMac, and I'm just gonna click on this Instagram folder. So these are just a few photos that we were posting on Instagram, and so this is a good example. And so how I like to think about it, I think Lightroom is laid out very well. And so you can just go from one step to another step to another step. Even if you don't remember everything that I tell you today, you can easily, as long as you just like walk through and read everything in order, you should be totally fine. And you'll be able to kind of, put your photos in a good spot and not mess everything up. So how does it work? Let's start on the left side. So this is the source. So this is where your photos are coming from. It could be an SD card, it could be a hard drive. In this case, it's my iMac. So I've clicked on the Instagram folder, and these are all the photos that are there. Now, this says new photos, which just means it's new photos to the catalog. So this catalog hasn't seen these particular photos before. And so that's why they're all selected. Now, if some of these were already in my catalog, they would be grayed out like this. And they would actually, they would be grayed out and they would say, oh, these photos have already been imported, so we already know that these exist. You don't need to bring them in. That's actually really handy for when you put in an SD card, say of a wedding, and I put them in and I'm like, oh, did I bring all these photos in? I don't remember. And so you can bring them in, and then Lightroom will automatically detect whether it's, it's already brought and copied those photos in. So that's a great way to confirm, just to double check that you've brought everything into Lightroom and that you've copied it to the right place. So I'm gonna go through and just click check all. You don't have to bring them all in. You can uncheck them and say, I just want these two, whatever. So the two things to note here are the difference between all photos and new photos. And that's all the photos kind of in this folder or on your SD card. And new photos means like what is new to Lightroom. It hasn't been imported into this catalog before. So it thinks you should import these. The thing along the top is also important. Copy as DNG. So DNG, converting to DNG is just like this kind of file format. So depending on what camera you have, your Nikon camera will have .NEF, your Canon camera may have something different, CAF, or I don't exactly remember what it is. And so DNG is this kind of like universal type of camera format. The point that they've made it is so that it's, kind of, compatible for the future or compatible for different programs. I don't normally do that. I just I use Nikon cameras. I don't think, Nikon file formats are going anywhere. I'm sure there's other reasons to do it, but I don't copy as DNG. I just leave it as is. So I actually copy. Something that I think is important is unless you specifically want to move photos, I wouldn't use the move option, especially if you have a CF card or something like that. I would not be moving important photos from the card and moving to the location. I always use copy so that the photos are safe. Now, in this case, what I can do is just click add. So say I actually just want to keep the photos on my desktop, the Instagram photos, and I just want to add it to the Lightroom catalog without actually moving the originals or copying the originals, then you can just click add. But I'm walking you through how I would normally bring a job in. And in that case, I would be copying from an SD card. So I would click on my SD card over here, and then I would click copy. I would make sure that they're all selected, and then I'd move over to the right side, and that is the photos came from here, what am I doing with them? And then now I'm going to put them into a location and I'm going to copy them into a specific location. And that location, remember, isn't inside of Lightroom, it's a specific place like this hard drive or your computer or something like that. At the top, there's a thing called file handling, and that's just some things that you can do to the files as they're being copied. So one thing is that you can build previews. So this kind of goes into the idea of how Lightroom uses photos. So remember, it doesn't actually use your original. It kind of creates this copy to be used in Lightroom. And what that means is it creates this kind of preview in Lightroom. And so that just enables you to see the photos, and it creates this kind of high resolution copy of it so that it feels like you're looking at the original, but you're not. It's just copying this kind of preview of it. And so what you can do is build previews. And what that does is it helps Lightroom work faster. So if maybe you've just started using Lightroom and you realize when you're going through photos, sometimes it takes a second for the photo to go from like blurry to clear. And all that's doing is Lightroom is loading that preview. And so what you can do when you're copying the photos is actually build those previews ahead of time so it's a lot faster to go through your images. And so that's something really nice to do, especially if you're just copying it and leaving for a few hours or copying it overnight. That thing can just be plugging away and doing all that work for you, so it's a lot faster later on. Build smart previews. This is a really, important thing and probably could be a whole video on its own. What this does is enables you to edit and sort and cull your images without having the original there. So, a great example for this is, say I have, I take my Lightroom catalog with me and I'm flying somewhere and I have a project to do, and on the plane, I want to be working on the last wedding that I did. Well, what I can do is click Smart Previews, and then I actually don't have to bring the hard drive of all of the original photos. So it creates and stores this thing called a smart preview, which enables and gives you enough information to be able to see the photo clearly, to edit it, to do all of these things just like the original photos there, but it's actually not. The only downsides to this is that you can't kind of export, big resolution images. I think you can actually still export kind of small images. The only downside to using smart previews is that it increases the size of the catalog folder. That's why I have my catalog on its own hard drive, because we use a lot of smart previews and that starts to take up a lot of space. You can click like don't import suspected duplicates. So like I said before, if it thinks this photo is already in the catalog, it's not gonna automatically select that and it's not gonna import it. Another thing is file renaming. That's very self-explanatory. It renames the files as you copy them in. Apply during import. This is a really cool thing, is that you can apply the presets as it's going in. So you don't have to do it manually. It automatically applies the presets to everything. And then the last thing, which is the most important, is where are these photos going? So I know I'm like beating a dead horse here, but remember, the photos aren't stored in Lightroom. They're stored somewhere where you tell it to be stored. So let's go back to it. They're coming from my SD card or the Instagram folder that I have, and I'm going to copy them somewhere. It's not possible to copy them into the Lightroom program. That's not how it works. You have to copy it to somewhere specifically. In this case, I have a hard drive connected to this computer called 2022, 2023. And so I'm gonna copy it to 2023, and I'm gonna create a folder called YouTube tutorial. And so what it's done here is created a folder called YouTube tutorial, and it's gonna copy all of these photos into the 2023. Actually, let's hit import. So now when I'm in my catalog and I'm using these photos, it's no longer going to be thinking that these photos are on my desktop in the Instagram folder. They're going to be pointed towards the hard drive, the 2022, 2023 hard drive. So wherever you copy it to, that's where Lightroom is imagining and thinks that these photos are. So what happens when I take that hard drive out? These photos are gonna be gray and they're not gonna be usable. Okay, so I ejected my hard drive, and this is what happens. It comes up with this little exclamation mark. All of my folders are grayed out, and it says like, where are the photos? And so even though there is a preview here, I can't do anything to the photo. I can't edit it. I can't do anything. So it's there and I can see it. That's because it created a preview, and so it enables me to kind of see the preview of this photo, but it doesn't let me edit it. I can't, if I go over here, I can't export it. It says unable to export. The source files are offline or missing. And that's also the big difference between having a smart preview. Because with a smart preview, I'd still be able to come in here and edit the photo. So I have reattached my hard drive and everything is back and I can edit things. And I've done all of my editing. I've gone through my culling. I've selected stars and I've selected colors and all that stuff. And I'm ready to export. I want to export these 3 images and send them to the client. So I will go over to the library, and in library is the places where you can import and only export things. So that's where I could click export here, and this is the export thing that comes up. Now, the left-hand side is just user presets. That just saves all of your settings for how you want to export something. So I have Luke Cleland here. This is just kind of like a quick export thing that I use if I want for Instagram or something. But again, if you just walk through each section, they're all very self-explanatory. Like, where do you want to save it? Do you want to rename it? What is the quality? Do you want to resize the image? I'm going to export just for web to just do a preview that I'm going to put on Instagram or something. So it only needs to be 72. If you're doing print, you want that to be at least 300. You can do sharpening, all of these different things. And then I'm putting it on desktop in folder called, let's call this YouTube tutorial. And I'm going to hit export. And boom, it's exported the images with all the editing that I've done, and then now I can send it to my client. So, that is it. That is the big overview of Lightroom. Hopefully there was some things in there and I helped you kind of understand Lightroom a little better. As I've done this video, I'm realizing that there are some tools and sections that I want to make entire videos about. If there's anything specific that you would love me to do kind of sooner rather than later, let me know in the comments if there's anything that I can help you with Adobe Lightroom. But that's it for now. So happy editing and culling.